What is assessment? Assessment is a key part of today's educational system. It is also serve as an individual evaluation system, and as way to compare performance across a spectrum and across populations. There are three purposes of assessment. These are the assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and lastly assessment of learning. We will go deeper into those three later on. In planning, developing, and using assessment methods that are fit for the purpose, teachers think about curriculum and about their students as they ask themselves the following questions. Why am I assessing? What am I assessing? What assessment method should I use? How can I ensure quality in this assessment process? How can I use the information from this assessment? Now, what is assessment for learning? Assessment for learning occurs when teachers use inferences about students' progress to inform teaching. Teachers' roles in assessment for learning are aligning instruction with the targeted outcomes, identifying particular learning needs of students or groups, selecting and adapting materials and resources, creating differentiated teaching strategies and learning opportunities, providing immediate feedback and direction to students. Teacher uses assessment for learning to uncover ideas and beliefs, prior knowledge, preconception, learning gaps, learning styles. Also, these informations are used to differentiate structure and differentiate instruction, reinforce and build learning, challenge beliefs or ideas, provide that will further students' learning.
Created using Powtoon.
Learning outcomes. Teachers use the curriculum as the starting point in deciding what to assess, and to focus on why and how students gain their understanding. Assessment for learning requires ongoing assessment of the curriculum outcomes that comprise the intended learning. Teachers create assessments that will expose students' thinking and skills in relation to the intended learning and the common preconceptions. Match appropriate assessment methods to intended learning outcomes. Teachers use focused observations, questioning, conversations, quizzes, computer-based assessments, learning logs, or whatever other methods are likely to give them information that will be useful for their planning and their teaching. Reliability depends on the accuracy and consistency of teachers' descriptions of the learning. Reference points. Learning outcomes are the reference points for assessment for learning. They serve as guides in providing feedback and in planning instruction. Learning expectations that are clear and detailed enable teachers to accurately consider each student's work in relation to these expectations. Validity is all about how well assessment can shed light on students' understanding of the ideas that are contained in the learning outcomes and in the effectiveness of the choices and the guidance that the teacher provides for the next stage of learning. Record keeping. The focus of record keeping is on documenting individual student learning and annotating it in relation to the continuum of learning. The focus is also on identifying groups of students with similar learning patterns, so that instruction can be efficiently differentiated. How can I use the information from this assessment? On feedback to students, feedback needs to be immediate and identify the way forward. It should not simply tell learners whether their answers are right or wrong, or simply provide evaluative feedback in the form of grades and short, non-specific comments of praise or censure. This latter offers very little direction for moving forward. Feedback for learning is descriptive and specific. Descriptive feedback makes explicit connections between students' thinking and the learning that is expected. It addresses faulty interpretations and lack of understanding. It provides the student with manageable next steps and an example of what good work looks like. Differentiate learning. Making comparisons between the curriculum expectations and learning. Adjusting instructions, grouping practices, and resources. Student receive the material, support and guidance needed for learning progress. Teacher can reduce misunderstandings and provide just-in-time support and streamline and speed up the learning process.
Created using Powtoon.
Reporting. Reporting is based on open, frequent, and ongoing communication with students and their parents about progress in learning, methods that the teacher is using to ensure ongoing progress, and ways that students, teachers, and parents might help move learning forward with minimal misunderstanding and confusion for the student. The reports might focus on a single outcome, but more often on a series or cluster of outcomes. Reporting should take into account what learning is expected, provide good models of what students can achieve, and identify strategies for supporting students.
Created using Powtoon.
Summary of planning assessment for learning. Why assess? To enable teachers to determine next steps in advancing student learning. What to assess? Each student's progress and learning needs in relation to the curricular outcomes. What methods? A range of methods in different modes that make students' skills and understanding visible. Ensuring quality, accuracy and consistency of observations and interpretations of student learning. Clear, detailed learning expectations. Accurate, detailed notes for descriptive feedback to each student. Using the information. Provide each student with accurate descriptive feedback to further his or her learning. Differentiate instruction by continually checking where each student is in relation to the curricular outcomes. Provide parents or guardians with descriptive feedback about student learning and ideas for support. Now, let's move on to assessment as learning. Assessment as learning occurs when students reflect on and monitor their progress to inform future learning. Self-assessment emphasizes assessment as a process of metacognition for students. An active process of cognitive restructuring that occurs when individuals interact with new ideas. Students are the critical connectors between assessment and learning. Students personally monitors what they are learning. Teachers' roles in assessment as learning. Model and teach the skills of self-assessment. Guide students in setting goals and monitoring their progress toward them. Provide exemplars and models of good practice and quality work that reflect curriculum outcomes. Work with students to develop clear criteria of good practice. Guide students in developing internal feedback or self-monitoring mechanisms to validate and question their own thinking, and to become comfortable with the ambiguity and uncertainty that is inevitable in learning anything new. Provide regular and challenging opportunities to practice so that students can become confident, competent self-assessors. Create an environment where it is safe for students to take chances and where support is readily available.
Created using Powtoon.
Why am I assessing? To determine what steps to take to support students' independence in learning. To obtain rich and detailed information about how students are progressing in developing the habits of minds and skills to monitor, challenge, and adjust their own learning. For students to monitor and challenge their own understanding, predict the outcome of their current level of understanding, make reasoned decision about their progress and difficulties. What am I assessing? Students' understanding of concepts. Students' use of metacognitive analysis. Students' goal-setting process and their thinking about their learning. Student strategies used to support, challenge, adjust, and advance their learning. What assessment method should I use? Teachers can use a range of methods in assessment as long as the methods are constructed to elicit detailed information both about students' learning and about their metacognitive processes. Although many assessment methods have the potential to encourage reflection and review, what matters in assessment as learning is that the methods allow students to consider their own learning in relation to models, criteria, rubrics, frameworks, and checklists that provide images of successful learning.
Created using Powtoon.
Assessment of learning. Assessment of learning occurs when teachers use evidence of students' achievement against goals and standards, summative. Confirm what students know, demonstrate whether or not they have met curriculum outcomes or the goals of their individualized programs. Certify proficiency and make decisions about students' future programs or placements. Provide evidence of achievement to parents, other educators, the students themselves, and sometimes to outside groups, example, employers, other educational institutions. Teachers' roles in assessment of learning. Provide rationale for undertaking a particular assessment of learning at a particular point in time. Provide clear descriptions of the intended learning. Provide processes that make it possible for students to demonstrate their competence and skill. Provide a range of alternative mechanisms for assessing the same outcomes. Provide public and defensible reference points for making judgments. Provide transparent approaches to interpretation. Provide descriptions of the assessment process. Provide strategies for recourse in the event of disagreement about the decisions. In order to know what steps to take to support students' independence in learning, teachers use assessment as learning to obtain rich and detailed information about how students are progressing in developing the habits of mind and skills to monitor, challenge, and adjust their own learning. For their part, students learn to monitor and challenge their own understanding, predict the outcomes of their current level of understanding, make reasoned decisions about their progress and difficulties, decide what else they need to know, organize and reorganize ideas, check for consistency between different pieces of information, draw analogies that help them advance their understanding, and set personal goals. By assessing. The purpose of assessment of learning is to measure, certify, and report the level of students' learning so that reasonable decision can be made about students. There are many potential uses of the information. Teachers can use the information to communicate with parents about their children's proficiency and progress. Parents and students can use the results for making educational and vocational decisions. Potential employers in post-secondary institutions can use the information to make decisions about hiring or acceptance. Principals, district or divisional administrators, and teachers can use the information to review and revise programming.
Created using Powtoon.
What am I assessing? Assessment of learning requires the collection and interpretation of information about students' accomplishments in important curricular areas, in ways that represent the nature and complexity of the intended learning. Because genuine learning for understanding is much more than just recognition or recall of facts or algorithms, assessment of learning tasks need to enable students to show the complexity of their understanding. Students need to be able to apply key concepts, knowledge, skills, and attitudes in ways that are authentic and consistent with current thinking in the knowledge domain. Why assessment method should I use? In assessment of learning, the methods chosen need to address the intended curriculum outcomes and the continuum of learning that is required to reach the outcomes. The methods must allow all students to show their understanding and produce sufficient information to support credible and defensible statements about the nature and quality of their learning, so that others can use the results in appropriate ways. Assessment of learning methods include not only tests and examinations, but also a rich variety of products and demonstrations of learning portfolios, exhibitions, performances, presentations, simulations, multimedia projects, and a variety of other written, oral, and visual methods. How can I ensure quality in this assessment process? Assessment of learning needs to be very carefully constructed so that the information upon which decisions are made is of the highest quality. Assessment of learning is designed to be summative, and to produce defensible and accurate descriptions of student competence in relation to defined outcomes and, occasionally, in relation to other students' assessment results. Certification of students' proficiency should be based on a rigorous, reliable, valid, and equitable process of assessment and evaluation. How can I use the information from this assessment? Because assessment of learning comes most often at the end of a unit or learning cycle, feedback to students has a less obvious effect on student learning than assessment for learning and assessment as learning. Nevertheless, students do rely on their marks and on teachers' comments as indicators of their level of success, and to make decisions about their future learning endeavors.